The smell hit me before I even unlocked the front door. It wasn't the smell of Morgan's famous pot roast, and it wasn't the scent of fresh laundry. It was bleach. Industrial grade, eye-watering bleach, barely masking something underneath it that smelled sweet, sick, and rotting. I froze on the welcome mat, my hand hovering over the key. In the teams, you learn to trust your nose before your eyes. And my nose was telling me that my house didn't smell like a home anymore. It smelled like a crime scene. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. I turned the key silently. Old habits die hard. I had been deployed for 18 months in regions of the world that don't exist on civilian maps. I was supposed to be gone for another 2 weeks, but I pulled every string I had to get home early. I wanted to surprise them. I wanted to see Evan and Felix's faces light up. They were 7 years old now. I had missed their birthdays. Again, I pushed the door open. "Morgan," I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the hallway. "Boys, Dad's home." Silence. Not just quiet. Dead silence. No hum of the refrigerator. No TV blaring cartoons. No footsteps thumping upstairs. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The air was cold. Stale. The bleach smell was overpowering here, burning the back of my throat. I dropped my duffel bag by the stairs. It landed with a heavy thud that echoed through the house. I walked into the living room. It was pristine. Too pristine. The throw pillows were karate chopped perfectly in the center. The carpet had fresh vacuum lines. But something was wrong. I scanned the room. Military training kicked in, scanned for anomalies. The mantle. The pictures. Every single framed photo on the fireplace mantle was face down. The wedding photo of me and Morgan. The newborn pictures of the twins. The photo of me in my dress blues holding them. All of them, laid flat against the wood. I walked over and flipped one up. It was a picture of me and the boys at the lake. My face had been scratched out with a black marker. Violent, jagged scratches that tore through the photo paper. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't normal. Morgan was erratic, sure. She had her moods. She was close with her sisters, too close, but she loved photos. She loved appearances. I walked into the kitchen. On the pristine granite counter, there was a single sheet of paper. "Hunter, if you're reading this, you're back early." Typical. You never could stick to a schedule. The boys needed a reset. Their energy was becoming toxic. Too much of your aggression was showing in them. My sisters and I have taken them to the farmhouse for a spiritual wellness retreat. Do not come looking for us. We need to purify the environment before you reinfect it. We will return on the 1st. Morgan, I checked the date on my watch. Today was the 2nd. "Where are you?" I whispered to the empty room. I pulled out my phone and dialed Morgan. Straight to voicemail. I dialed her sister, Clara. Voicemail. I dialed the other sisters, Daphne, Eliza, Fiona. Nothing. Panic started to rise, cold and sharp in my gut. Purify. That word made my skin crawl. Morgan's sisters were into weird stuff. Crystals, energy healing, extreme fasting diets. But they had never taken my sons away. I walked toward the hallway that led to the garage, intending to check if the minivan was there. But as I passed the basement door, I stopped. The smell was stronger here. The bleach couldn't hide it. Underneath the chemical sting, there was the smell of waste. Human waste. And something else. A sound. It was so faint. If I hadn't spent years listening for twigs snapping in the jungle, I would have missed it. Scritch. Scritch. Like a mouse scratching at wood. I put my hand on the doorknob. Locked. We never locked the basement. It was finished. It was the boys' playroom. That's where the Legos were. That's where the big TV was. I looked closely at the doorframe. There was a fresh, shiny heavy-duty padlock hasp screwed into the wood on the outside of the door. A master lock secured it. Why would you padlock a playroom from the outside? "Evan," I said, my voice trembling. "Felix." Scritch. It stopped. "Is someone in there?" Silence. Then, a noise that broke me. A small, dry cough. Weak. It sounded like a sick animal. "Stand back." I warned. I didn't bother looking for a key. I took a step back, chambered my leg, and drove the heel of my boot into the wood right next to the lock. Crack! The wood splintered, but the lock held. "Daddy's coming," I shouted. "I'm coming, hold on." I kicked again, putting 18 months of rage and fear into the strike. The doorframe shattered. The hasp flew off, spinning across the hallway floor. I ripped the door open. The smell rushed up the stairs and hit me like a physical blow. It was a wall of heat, feces, and rot. It smelled like a third-world prison cell. "Boys," I choked out, pulling my shirt up over my nose. I flipped the light switch at the top of the stairs. Nothing. The bulb had been unscrewed or burned out. I pulled my tactical flashlight from my belt. I always carried it, and clicked it on. The beam cut through the dark, stale air as I descended the carpeted stairs, my boots crunching on something dry and scattered on the steps. I reached the bottom. The basement wasn't a playroom anymore. The TV was gone. The couches were gone. The Legos were gone. The windows were boarded up with plywood. The only light came from my flashlight beam, dancing across the room. In the far corner, where the toy chest used to be, there were 2 dog cages. Large wire crates, meant for German shepherds. They were pushed against the wall, sitting on top of a plastic tarp that was stained brown and yellow. I walked forward, my breath caught in my chest, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I shone the light into the first cage. There was a pile of dirty rags in the corner. Then, the rags moved. A face turned toward the light. It was skeletal. The skin was pulled tight over the cheekbones, translucent and gray. The eyes were sunken so deep into the skull they looked like black holes. The lips were cracked and bleeding. It was a child, but it looked like a famine victim. He raised a hand to block the light. His arm was just bone. The wrist was the same width as the elbow. "Evan," I whispered, dropping to my knees. The boy in the cage flinched. He scrambled backward, pressing his spine against the wire mesh, terror etched into his face. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Just a dry, rasping wheeze. I looked at the second cage. Felix was curled up in a fetal position, motionless. He looked even smaller. His ribs poked through his pajama shirt like razor blades. There was a bowl in the center of the cage. It was bone dry. They weren't at a retreat. They had been down here. I looked at the calendar on the wall, where the boys used to mark off days until Christmas. Someone had taken a red marker and crossed off day after day. 31 days. My wife and her sisters had locked my 7-year-old sons in dog cages in the dark for a month. I reached for the latch on Evan's cage, my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip the metal. "It's Dad," I choked out, tears blurring my vision. "Buddy, it's Dad. I'm here." Evan looked at me. He didn't recognize me. His eyes were wide, feral, and full of madness. He whispered one word, a word that stopped my heart. "Food." I ripped the cage door open, tearing the metal off its hinges. I reached in to touch him, but he recoiled, covering his head with his hands. "Don't hurt me, Auntie," he whimpered. "I was good. I didn't eat. I promise I didn't eat." I didn't wait for an answer. I didn't try to explain. I reached into the filth and scooped Evan up into my arms. He weighed nothing. It felt like I was holding a bundle of dry sticks wrapped in parchment paper. His head lolled back against my shoulder, his neck muscles too weak to support it. "Felix," I commanded, turning to the other cage. "Come here. Now." Felix didn't move. He just stared at the empty bowl in front of him, rocking back and forth. I had to put Evan down on the only clean spot of carpet near the stairs, which wasn't clean at all, to get his brother. I crawled into the second cage. The smell inside was concentrated, burning my eyes. I grabbed Felix. He was stiff, his limbs locked in that fetal position. When I pulled him out, he let out a sharp cry of pain. "I know," I whispered, hoisting one boy onto each shoulder. "I know it hurts. I've got you." I ran up the stairs. My boots pounded against the wood, the sound echoing like gunshots in the empty house. I kicked the front door open and burst into the cool night air. The fresh oxygen felt shocking after the toxic air of the basement. I didn't bother with car seats. There was no time. I laid them both in the back seat of my truck. They looked like discarded dolls on the leather upholstery. Evan's eyes were rolling back in his head. "Stay with me," I growled, vaulting into the driver's seat. "Do not close your eyes." I tore out of the driveway, jumping the curb. The truck engine roared as I floored it. I ran the first stop sign, then the red light on Main Street. I drove with one hand on the wheel and the other reaching back, blindly feeling for a pulse on Evan's leg. It was there, but it was thready, fast and weak, like a hummingbird trapped in a cage. The drive to St. Jude's Hospital usually took 20 minutes. I made it in 9. I screeched up to the emergency room entrance, abandoning the truck right in the ambulance bay. I kicked the doors open, carrying a boy in each arm. "Help!" I roared. "I need a trauma team. Now." The lobby froze. A security guard started to step forward, seeing a large man in tactical pants screaming, but then he saw what I was holding. He stopped dead. Nurses swarmed. I was separated from them instantly. They took Evan from my left arm and Felix from my right. I watched as they laid them on gurneys. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the ER, the damage was undeniable. Their skin was gray. Their hair was falling out in clumps. You could see the outline of every organ in their abdomens. "Code blue bed 4, someone shouted. "No," I whispered, pushing forward. "That's Evan." "Sir, you have to stay back." A nurse pushed against my chest. She was half my size, but I let her stop me. I stood there, shaking, my hands covered in the grime from the basement, watching the doors swing shut behind my sons. Time dissolved. I sat in the waiting room plastic chair, staring at my boots. I still smelled like the basement. People moved away from me. I didn't care. I replayed the last 30 minutes in my head. The cages, the padlock, the calendar. 31 days. An hour later, a doctor came out. He looked exhausted and angry. He walked straight to me. "Mr. West." I stood up. "Are they alive?" "They are," the doctor said. His tone was ice cold. He wasn't looking at me with sympathy. He was looking at me with disgust. "We have them stabilized. We're starting refeeding protocols very slowly. If we give them regular food now, their hearts will stop. It's called refeeding syndrome." I nodded, feeling sick. "I know what it is. I've seen it in POW camps." The doctor's eyes narrowed. "POW camps. That's appropriate. Because I've been an ER doctor for 20 years, and I have never seen a case of malnutrition this severe in the United States. Your sons have lost 40% of their body weight. They have pressure sores on their hips from lying on concrete. Their kidneys are shutting down." He stepped closer, invading my personal space. "This didn't happen overnight. This took weeks of deliberate deprivation." "Where were you?" "I was deployed," I said, my voice sounding hollow. "I just got home. I found them an hour ago." The doctor studied my face, looking for a lie. He saw the shock in my eyes. He saw the way my hands were still trembling. His expression softened, just a fraction, but the suspicion remained. "Police are on their way," he said. "It's mandatory reporting. And honestly, Mr. West, I would have called them even if it wasn't." "Good," I said. "I hope they bring handcuffs." 2 uniformed officers arrived 10 minutes later. They separated me from the general population, taking me into a small interview room. They asked the standard questions at first, but the tension was thick. "You have sole custody?" one officer asked, pen hovering over his notepad. "Joint," I said. "With their mother, Morgan." "And where is Morgan?" "I don't know," I said. The rage flared up again, hot and blinding. "She left a note. She said she took them to a wellness retreat." "She lied. And you have no idea where she is?" "If I knew where she was," I said, leaning forward, "you wouldn't be talking to me here. You'd be arresting me at her location." The officer stopped writing. He looked at his partner. "We need to get a statement from the boys when they wake up. They can barely speak." I snapped. Evan didn't even know who I was. A nurse knocked on the door. "Mr. West? They're asking for you." "Well, one of them is." I pushed past the cops. I followed the nurse into the ICU. The room was dim. Machines beeped in a steady, rhythmic cadence. Evan was asleep, sedated, tubes running into his nose and arms. He looked like a skeleton covered in a sheet. But Felix was awake. He was staring at the ceiling, his eyes wide and unblinking. He was strapped down gently so he wouldn't pull out the IVs. I walked to the side of his bed. I reached out to touch his hand, his tiny, bony hand. "Felix," I whispered. "It's Daddy. You're safe. The bad part is over." Felix turned his head slowly. His eyes locked onto mine. There was no recognition, no relief, only pure, distilled terror. He pulled his hand away from me as if I were fire. He scrambled backward against the pillows, the heart monitors spiking rapidly. Beep, 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 beep. "No," Felix croaked, his voice cracking. "No more. I said the prayer. I said it. It's me, buddy. It's Dad." Felix shook his head violently. Tears streamed down his hollow cheeks. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking past me, at the door, as if he expected someone else to walk in. "Don't tell Auntie Clara," he sobbed, curling into a ball. "Please don't tell her I drank the water. She'll put the nails back in. Please, Daddy, don't let the ants come back." I froze. The nails? I leaned in closer, my heart shattering into dust. "What nails, Felix?" He looked at me with the eyes of a soldier who had seen too much war. "The ones in the stick," he whispered. "For when we slept too much." The world went silent again. The beeping of the monitors, the murmur of the nurses in the hallway. It all faded into a dull roar in my ears. Nails. They used nails on my 7-year-old sons. I stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the linoleum floor, but I didn't hear it. I walked out of the room. The police officer was standing by the nurse's station, sipping coffee. I walked right past him. "Mr. West? Where are you going?" he called out. "To get fresh air," I lied. My voice was deadly calm. Too calm. It was the voice I used before a breach, before the flashbang went off. I walked out of the hospital, into the parking lot, and got back into my truck. I didn't go home. I drove to a 24-hour diner 3 miles away, parked in the back corner where the lights were broken, and pulled my laptop from under the seat. I wasn't a hacker, but I knew people who were. And I knew Morgan's passwords. She used the same one for everything. Our anniversary. The date she promised to love, honor, and cherish. I logged into her cloud account. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Photos. Emails. Nothing. She had wiped her gallery before she left. Smart. But not smart enough. I went to her bank statements. The activity was frantic. Withdrawals of $5,000. Transfers to an LLC called Sanctum of Light. Another transfer for rent on a property in the remote hills of the county. And then I found the group chat. It was an archived message thread titled The Cleansing. The participants were Morgan and all 7 of her sisters. The 8 aunts. The women who had bought my son's birthday presents, who had sat at my Thanksgiving table. I opened the last message, sent 4 hours ago. "Clara, the energy is shifting. The vessels are empty. We are close to the breakthrough. Morgan, I worry about the physical shells. They are weak. Daphne, weakness is the sin leaving the body. Do not falter, sister. The warrior blood must be purged. Hunters' violence is in their marrow. Starvation is the only way to kill the predator inside them." I read that line 3 times. Hunters' violence is in their marrow. They weren't just starving them. They were trying to kill me by killing the parts of me that lived in my sons. They thought my DNA was a virus, and starvation was the cure. I scrolled up. There were pictures. My stomach turned over. Pictures of Evan and Felix in the cages. Pictures of them crying. Pictures of the sisters standing over them in white robes, smiling serenely while my boys lay in their own filth. And then, a location pin. Sent yesterday at 8:15 p.m. I clicked it. It opened a map. A farmhouse, deep in the woods, 20 miles north of town. Off the grid. No neighbors for miles. I closed the laptop. I looked at my hands. They were steady now. The shaking had stopped. The grief was gone. The confusion was gone. There was only clarity. A cold, hard, metallic clarity. I reached into the glove box and pulled out my burner phone, a habit from the service. I left my main phone on the dashboard of the truck. Let the cops track that. Let them think I was sitting in a diner parking lot grieving. I wasn't grieving anymore. I drove back to my house. I didn't park in the driveway. I parked 2 streets over and approached on foot, moving through the shadows of the neighbors' hedges. The police tape was already up around my front door. A cruiser sat out front, lights flashing silently. I went around the back. I climbed the trellis to the master bedroom balcony, the one with the loose lock I'd been meaning to fix for years. I slipped inside. I went to the safe in the closet. I spun the dial. Click. I didn't take the firearms. If I took a gun, and I used it, I would go to prison for the rest of my life, and the boys would be orphans. I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to be surgical. I took the extendable baton. I took the heavy-duty zip ties. I took a roll of duct tape. I took my night vision monocular. And I took a pair of weighted sap gloves, leather gloves with lead shots sewn into the knuckles. I changed out of my travel clothes. I put on black cargo pants, a black hoodie, and my boots. I looked in the mirror. The man staring back wasn't a father. He wasn't a husband. He was a weapon. I slipped back out into the night, avoiding the police cruiser. I retrieved my truck and drove north. The drive took 40 minutes. As the city lights faded behind me, the road turned to gravel, then to dirt. The trees closed in overhead, creating a tunnel of darkness. I killed the headlights a mile out. I drove using the ambient moonlight and memory, the tires crunching softly on the dirt. I parked the truck in a dense thicket of pines, covering the windshield with branches to stop any reflection. I moved on foot through the woods. The air was crisp and smelled of pine needles and damp earth. It was peaceful. It was a lie. I reached the edge of the tree line. There it was. The farmhouse. A sprawling, 2-story wooden structure with a wraparound porch. It looked idyllic. A wellness retreat. But the windows were glowing with warm, yellow light. I raised the monocular to my eye. Through the front window, I could see the dining room. A long wooden table was set. Candles flickered. And there they were. All 8 of them. Morgan, Clara, Daphne, the whole coven. They were wearing white linen clothes. They looked clean, healthy, radiant. And they were eating. My jaw clenched so hard I thought a tooth would crack. The table was groaning under the weight of food. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, wine bottles. They were passing platters, laughing, their heads thrown back in joy. They were feasting. Miles away, my sons were lying in a hospital bed with tubes down their throats because their stomachs had shrunk to the size of walnuts. My sons had been eating their own fingernails to survive, and these women were gorging themselves on a banquet. I lowered the monocular. I took a deep breath. I let it out slowly. I wasn't going to knock. I moved toward the power box on the side of the house. I reached the side of the house, my boots silent on the damp grass. I could hear them now. Through the thin walls of the farmhouse, the sound of their laughter drifted out. It was a light, tinkling sound, the sound of a celebration. More wine, Clara? I heard Morgan's voice. It was cheerful, unburdened. Oh, just a splash, Clara replied. We deserve it. The work was exhausting. The work, torturing my children, was work to them. I found the breaker box. It was an old, gray metal panel, rusted at the hinges. I didn't just want to flip the switch. I wanted to ensure they couldn't turn it back on. I pulled my multi-tool from my belt. Inside the house, the laughter grew louder. To the new beginning, someone toasted. Clink. I jammed the pliers into the main fuse block and ripped the copper wiring out. Sparks showered down onto my boots, sizzling in the wet grass. Zap. Instantly, the farmhouse went black. The laughter inside cut off like a radio cord had been severed. What happened? Did the storm knock it out? I can't see anything. Where's my phone? Stay calm, sisters. It's just an outage. I moved around to the back door. It was a screen door, flimsy. I sliced the mesh with my knife and unlatched it. I stepped into the mudroom. The smell of the food was nauseatingly strong here. Roast chicken and rosemary. It smelled like every Sunday dinner I had missed while serving my country. I slipped the weighted gloves onto my hands. The lead shot over my knuckles felt heavy, reassuring. I opened the inner door and stepped into the kitchen. It was pitch black, but my eyes had adjusted to the darkness outside. Theirs hadn't. They were blind. Who's there? Clara's voice. Sharp. Imperious. Morgan, did you leave the door open? I didn't answer. I walked silently across the linoleum, navigating by the faint moonlight filtering through the kitchen window. I reached the archway that led to the dining room. They were scrambling now, chairs scraping against the floor, phone flashlights flickering on. The beams danced frantically around the room, illuminating plates of half-eaten food and panicked faces. Someone is in here, Daphne whispered. I felt a draft. Don't be ridiculous, Clara snapped. It's just the wind. I stepped into the doorway. I blocked the only exit. One of the phone lights swept over me. The beam hit my chest, then moved up to my face. The scream that followed was primal. Hunter! Morgan shrieked. She dropped her wine glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor, red wine splashing like blood. Silence fell over the room. 8 pairs of eyes locked onto me. I stood there, motionless. The hood of my sweatshirt cast a shadow over my eyes, but they knew who it was. They could feel the radiation of my rage. You're not supposed to be here, Clara said, her voice trembling but still trying to maintain control. She stood at the head of the table, a carving knife still in her hand. This is private property. You are trespassing. I took one step forward. My boot crunched on the broken glass. Where are the boys? I asked. My voice was a low rumble, barely above a whisper. They are safe, Morgan stammered, backing away until she hit the wall. They are at a camp. A special camp. Liar, I said. I took another step. I found them, I said. I found the cages. I found the locks. I found the nails. The air left the room. The other sisters started to whimper, huddled together like sheep realizing the wolf had jumped the fence. But Clara didn't back down. She raised the carving knife. They were sick, Clara yelled, her face twisting into a mask of fanaticism. They were infected with your violence. We were saving them. We were purging the sin. You starved them for 31 days, I said, continuing my slow, steady advance. You watched them wither away while you ate feasts like this. It was necessary. Clara screamed. Stay back. I'm warning you. Sisters grabbed the knives. A few of them hesitated, looking at the steak knives on the table. Pick them up, Clara commanded. He's the devil. He's come to undo the work. 2 of the sisters, Daphne and Eliza, grabbed knives. They were shaking, terrified, but they held them up. Hunter, please, Morgan sobbed. Just leave. We can talk about this. We can explain the spiritual significance. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handful of heavy-duty zip ties. I tossed them onto the center of the table, right into the mashed potatoes. Here is how this goes, I said. You are going to zip tie each other's hands behind your backs, and you are going to sit on the floor, and we are going to wait for the police. No, Clara lunged. She moved faster than I expected for a woman her age. She thrust the carving knife toward my chest. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I sidestepped. A simple pivot. The blade sliced through the air where my heart had been a second ago. As she stumbled past me, I grabbed her wrist. I didn't just hold it. I crushed it. I squeezed with the full force of my grip, enhanced by the weighted glove. There was a sickening crunch of small bones grinding together. Clara screamed and dropped the knife. That, I said, was for the first week. I shoved her backward. She crashed into the china cabinet, bringing plates down in a shattering cascade. Get him, Clara screeched from the floor, clutching her broken wrist. Kill him, Daphne and Eliza charged. And that was when the soldier took over. The room exploded into chaos. Daphne swung her steak knife wildly, aiming for my face. It was a sloppy, desperate attack. I caught her forearm with my left hand, stopping the blade inches from my eye. With my right hand, the one wearing the weighted glove, I delivered a short, controlled strike to her solar plexus. The air left her lungs in a whoosh. She folded instantly, dropping to her knees, gasping for breath that wouldn't come. I didn't let go of her arm. I twisted it behind her back, forcing the joint past its natural range until I felt the pop of the shoulder dislocation. That's for the padlock. I grunted, shoving her away. She collapsed next to Clara, curling into a ball of misery. Eliza hesitated. She saw her sister go down in 2 seconds. She backed up, the knife trembling in her hand. "Hunter, stop!" Morgan screamed. "You're hurting them." "Hurting them?" I turned to look at my wife. "You nailed the basement door shut while our sons ate their own hair. You don't get to talk about hurt." From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Fiona, the youngest sister, had grabbed a heavy wine bottle. She swung it at the back of my head. I ducked. The bottle smashed against the doorframe, showering me with glass and red wine. I spun around and swept her legs. It was a basic takedown. She hit the floor hard. Before she could scramble up, I stomped on her ankle. Not enough to shatter it completely, but enough to fracture the tibia. She wouldn't be walking out of here. She screamed, a high-pitched sound that pierced the darkness. "Stay down," I warned. The command echoed off the walls, freezing the remaining sisters in place. "For down." "For to go?" The remaining sisters, Ivy, Jocelyn, Kendra, and Morgan, were huddled in the corner. They had dropped their weapons. The fight had left them. They weren't warriors. They were bullies who were used to tormenting helpless children, not fighting a Tier 1 operator. "Please," Ivy wept. "We were just doing what Clara said. She's the leader. She made us." "You watched," I said, stepping over Fiona's writhing body. "You could have opened the door. You could have called me. You could have slipped them a piece of bread. But you didn't. You watched." I walked over to the table. I picked up the zip ties I had thrown earlier. "Turn around," I ordered. "Hands behind your backs. Now." They complied. They were sobbing, terrified, broken. I moved down the line, cinching the thick plastic ties tight around their wrists. Too tight. I wanted them to lose circulation. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the restraint my boys had felt. I got to Morgan last. She looked up at me, mascara running down her face, her white dress stained with wine. "Hunter, I'm their mother. I carried them. You buried them," I corrected. I spun her around and zip-tied her wrists. Then I walked over to Clara. She was still on the floor, cradling her crushed wrist, glaring at me with pure hate. "You'll go to jail for this," she hissed. "Assault on 8 women. The jury will hang you." "Maybe," I said. "But you'll never touch my kids again." I zip-tied her good hand to her broken one. She howled in pain. I dragged all of them into the center of the living room, forcing them to sit in a circle on the rug. I pulled a chair from the dining room and sat down in front of them, watching them like a hawk. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a cold, heavy fatigue. My knuckles ached. My heart was still pounding a slow, heavy rhythm. I pulled out my burner phone. I dialed 911. 911. "What is your emergency?" "I need police and an ambulance at the Miller farmhouse on County Road 9, I said calmly. "There has been an altercation." "Sir, are you injured? Is the assailant still there?" "I am the assailant," I said, "and the victims are secured." I hung up. I sat there in the dark, listening to them cry. The smell of the spilled wine mixed with the smell of fear. It was a different kind of rot than the basement, but it was just as foul. Morgan looked up at me. Her lip was trembling. "You broke my family, Hunter." "No," I said, leaning forward, my elbows on my knees. "I broke your cult. There's a difference." 10 minutes later, I saw the blue and red lights flashing through the trees. The sirens wailed, getting louder and louder. I stood up. I put my hands on top of my head. I walked out onto the front porch and waited. Sheriff's deputies swarmed the yard, guns drawn. "Get on the ground. Now." "Face down." I complied instantly. I lay on the cold wood of the porch, feeling the grit against my cheek. "Don't shoot," I yelled. "I am unarmed. My weapon is secured." A knee drove into my back. Handcuffs clicked onto my wrists. Metal, cold, familiar. "You have the right to remain silent," the deputy recited. As they hauled me up, another group of officers ran into the house. Moments later, I heard the radio chatter. "Dispatch, We have multiple casualties inside. Looks like a war zone. Broken bones, lacerations. Send 2 more ambos. The deputy shoved me toward the cruiser. You did a real number on them, didn't you, tough guy? Beating up a bunch of women. I stopped. I looked him in the eye. Check the basement of my house, I said. 1402, Oak Street. Check the cages. He shoved me into the back seat. As the car pulled away, I saw Morgan being led out on a stretcher. She looked at me through the window. She wasn't crying anymore. A small, twisted smile played on her lips. She mouthed something to me. I couldn't hear it, but I read her lips perfectly. You didn't find the diary. My blood ran cold. The holding cell was gray, cold, and smelled of stale urine and industrial cleaner. It was a familiar environment, not unlike some of the black sites I'd been in overseas. But this time, I was on the wrong side of the bars. I sat on the metal cot, staring at the concrete wall. My hands were still cuffed, but they had moved them to the front. The adrenaline crash had left me shivering. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Evan's skeletal face. I saw Felix flinching away from me. I had been in there for 12 hours. No phone call. No lawyer. Just silence. Finally, the heavy steel door buzzed and clanked open. A man in a sharp gray suit walked in. He looked out of place in the grimy jail. He was carrying a leather briefcase. Hunter West. That's me. I'm Grant Reynolds. Your commanding officer sent me. I'm your JAG lawyer, but I'm handling the civilian side for now. He sat down on the metal stool across from me and opened his briefcase. He didn't look happy. He pulled out a stack of papers and slammed them onto the small table bolted to the floor. You're in deep, Hunter. Aggravated assault. 8 counts. Kidnapping. Torture. Torture. I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. I zip-tied them. They tortured my kids. That's not what the news is saying, Grant said. He pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. He turned it around to face me. It was a local news broadcast. The headline shouted in bold red letters, Delta Force Dad Goes Rambo. Attacks wife and sisters at wellness retreat. The reporter was standing outside the farmhouse. Sources say Hunter West, a highly trained special operator, tracked his estranged wife and her sisters to this peaceful retreat and brutally assaulted them. Police describe a scene of carnage inside. Morgan West, the victim, claimed she was hiding her children from her husband's violent outbursts. I stared at the screen, my mouth dry. They're lying. Did the cops go to the hospital? Did they see the boys? They saw them, Grant said, taking the tablet back. But Morgan and her sisters have a story for that too. They're claiming the boys had a rare autoimmune disorder that caused rapid weight loss. They say they took them to the retreat to try holistic healing because you refused to let them see a doctor. They're saying the starvation was a medical condition, and they were the only ones trying to help. That's insane, I said, standing up and pacing the small cell. Nobody will believe that. The doctors said it was starvation. The doctors are testifying, Grant said. But the sisters have hired a high-powered legal team. They have their own experts lined up who will testify that the boys were sick before they left. And with you beating 8 women into the hospital? You look like the villain, Hunter. The jury is going to see photos of Clara's crushed wrist and Fiona's broken leg, and they're going to hate you. He sighed and rubbed his temples. We got you bail. The colonel pulled every favor he had, but the judge set it at $2 million. You need to post 10%. I don't have 200 grand, I said. The unit pooled it, Grant said quietly. The guys chipped in. You're getting out today. My throat tightened. Thank them for me. Don't thank them yet. Because here's the kicker. Child Protective Services has taken emergency custody of Evan and Felix. I slammed my fist against the wall. What? Until the investigation is complete, the state has them. They're in a secure medical ward. You can't see them. Morgan can't see them. They are wards of the state. They need their father. I ward. They're terrified. If you go near them, you go back to jail, and you lose them forever, Grant said sternly. You have to play this smart. We need proof. Hard proof. Not just your word against 8 women with broken bones. I remembered Morgan's lips moving in the police cruiser. You didn't find the diary. There's a diary, I said. Morgan kept a journal. She mentioned it to me. Where is it? I don't know. I tore the house apart looking for clues, but I didn't see a diary. Find it, Grant said, standing up. Because right now, it's he said, she said, and she has 7 witnesses backing her up. You have nothing but a violent record and a pair of sap gloves. I was processed out an hour later. The walk to the parking lot was a gauntlet. Reporters were camped out, shouting questions. Mr. West, did you hit your wife? Why did you starve your children? Are you suffering from PTSD? I ignored them, keeping my head down, and got into Grant's car. He dropped me off at my house. The police tape was gone. The front door was boarded up where I had kicked it in. I walked inside. The smell of bleach was still there, faint now, mixed with the smell of stale air. I walked to the basement door. The shattered wood lay on the floor. I walked down the stairs. The cages were gone, taken into evidence. But the outlines were still there on the carpet, ghosts of the torture chamber. Where is it? I whispered. Where did you hide it, Morgan? I started searching. I ripped up the carpet. Nothing. I checked the vents. Nothing. I checked the inside of the toilet tank. Nothing. I went into the boys' room upstairs. It was untouched. Their beds were made, Spider-Man sheets smoothed out. I sat on Evan's bed, putting my head in my hands. I was failing them. I had saved their lives, but I was losing the war. I looked around the room. A bookshelf filled with Dr. Seuss and dinosaur books. A toy chest in the corner. An old wooden one I had built them for their 3rd birthday. Wait. The toy chest in the basement. The one I thought was missing. It wasn't missing. It was never there. The cages were in the corner where the toy chest used to be. But this was the new toy chest upstairs. The old one, the one I built, had a false bottom. I made it so they could hide their treasures, like rocks and shiny coins. Morgan knew about it. She used to joke it was a good place to hide jewelry. I ran to the toy chest. I threw open the lid. It was filled with stuffed animals. I tossed them out frantically. Teddy bears, stuffed giraffes, plush sharks flying across the room. I reached the bottom. I felt for the hidden latch under the cedar plank. Click. The false bottom popped up. And there it was. A black leather-bound notebook. I pulled it out, my hands trembling. I opened it to the first page. Day 1. The purification begins. The vessels must be emptied before they can be filled with light. I flipped to the middle. Day 14. Evan is resisting. He cries for his father. We had to implement the discipline stick. The nails are small, but they remind him of the pain of the world. I felt sick. I wanted to vomit. This was it. The confession. I flipped to the last page. Day 30. The funds are running low. The farmhouse is expensive. But Oliver came through again. He is such a devoted uncle. He believes in the wellness journey. He wired another $10,000 today. My breath caught in my throat. The book fell from my hands and hit the floor. Oliver. My brother. The name stared up at me from the floor, burning into my retinas. Oliver. My older brother. The golden boy. The one who went to law school while I enlisted. The one who was currently running for district attorney on a platform of family values and justice. Oliver had funded this. I picked up the diary, my grip tightening until the leather cover creaked. I felt a different kind of rage now. The rage at the sisters had been hot, explosive. This was cold. This was ice in my veins. This was betrayal on a biblical scale. I walked out of the house. I didn't call Grant. I didn't call the police. This was family business. I got into my truck. It was almost midnight. I drove toward the wealthy side of town, the gated communities where the lawns were manicured with scissors and the driveways were heated. Oliver lived in a colonial mansion that looked like it belonged on a postcard. I pulled up to the security gate. Hunter West to see Oliver West. I told the guard. Is he expecting you, sir? He's family, I said. Open the gate. The guard hesitated, then buzzed me in. I drove up the winding driveway. The lights were on in Oliver's study. He was always working late, building his empire. I parked and walked to the front door. I didn't knock. I still had my key. He gave it to me years ago, in case of emergencies. This was an emergency. I let myself in. The house smelled of expensive mahogany and old money. I walked down the hall to the study. The double doors were ajar. Oliver was sitting behind his massive oak desk, surrounded by law books. He looked up, startled, as I pushed the door open. "Hunter." He stood up, taking off his reading glasses. "My God, I saw the news. I've been trying to call you, but I figured you were in custody. Are you okay? You look like hell." He came around the desk, arms open, face full of concern. "I can't believe those crazy women. Tell me what I need to do. I'll represent you. I'll bury them." I didn't move. I just watched him. He was a good actor. Maybe better than Morgan. "Stop," I said. Oliver froze. "Hunter? What's wrong?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the black diary. I tossed it onto his desk. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of his Mont Blanc pen set. "Page 84, I said. "Read it." Oliver looked at the book, then back at me. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. "What is this?" "Morgan's journal. The one where she details how she starved my sons for 31 days. And how you paid for it." Oliver's face went white. Not pale, ghost white. He picked up the book. His hands weren't shaking like mine had been. They were steady, calculated lawyer hands. He opened it. He read the entry. The silence in the room was deafening. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner sounded like a bomb counting down. Oliver closed the book slowly. He looked up at me. The concern was gone. His eyes were hard now. "Calculating." "Hunter," he began, his voice smooth, practicing his closing argument. "You have to understand. Morgan came to me a month ago. She was a wreck. She said she needed to get away. She said the boys were having behavioral issues, and she found a holistic camp that could help. She asked for money. $10,000? I stepped closer. For a camp. It was a high-end retreat. Oliver argued, stepping back. I didn't ask questions. She's my sister-in-law. I thought I was helping her save her marriage. I thought I was helping you. Did you know? I asked. Did you know she was starving them? Of course not. Oliver shouted. My God, Hunter, they're my nephews. I thought they were doing yoga and hiking. I didn't know about the cages. You didn't check? I slammed my hand on the desk. You wired 10 grand to a shell company and never once asked for a brochure? You never asked to talk to the boys. I was busy. Oliver yelled back. I'm running a campaign. I just wrote the check to make the problem go away. That's what I do. You funded a torture chamber, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. And now, you're going to help me destroy them. Oliver let out a shaky breath. He ran a hand through his perfect hair. He walked to the window and looked out at his perfect lawn. I can't, he said softly. What did you say? I can't get involved, Hunter. If this comes out, if it comes out that I funded the retreat, my campaign is over. My career is over. The press won't care that I didn't know. They'll just see the check. Candidate West funds child abuse cult. I'll be ruined. I looked at my brother. I saw the fear in his eyes. Not fear for the boys. Fear for his ambition. So you're going to let them lie? I asked. You're going to let them paint me as the villain and take my kids away, just to save your election? I can get you a plea deal, Oliver said, turning back to me, pleading now. I know the DA. We can get the assault charges reduced. Probation. You won't do time. But we have to bury the diary. If that diary enters evidence, my name comes out. He reached for the book. I moved faster. I snatched the diary off the desk before he could touch it. You have a choice, Oliver, I said. You can stand with me in court as my lawyer and tell the truth. You can tell the jury you were duped, just like I was. You can help me put those monsters in prison. Or, Oliver asked, his eyes narrowing. Or, I said, backing toward the door, I give this diary to the press myself. And I tell them you weren't just a donor. I'll tell them you were the mastermind. That's a lie. Is it? I held up the book. Morgan's writing is pretty vague here. Oliver came through. Oliver is devoted. It could look like a conspiracy. Oliver stared at me. He saw the soldier in me. He saw that I was willing to burn his world down to save mine. He slumped into his chair. Defeated. Monday, he said, his voice hollow. The arraignment is Monday. I'll file the appearance paperwork in the morning. Good, I said. And Oliver? He looked up. If you cross me again, I said, I won't break your bones. I'll break your life. I walked out of the study. As I reached the front door, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Hunter, it's the nurse from the ICU. You need to come. The boys are awake. And they're talking. I stood on Oliver's front porch, staring at the text message. The night air was biting, but I was sweating. The boys are awake. I couldn't go. The court order was clear. If I stepped foot in that hospital, I'd be arrested again, and this time, there would be no bail. I would lose them forever. I typed back, my fingers clumsy with urgency. I can't come. Court order. Are they okay? The dots bubbled on the screen for an agonizing minute. They are asking for you. But CPS is here. A social worker is in the room. She's recording everything. They are interviewing them. My heart hammered. This was it. This was the moment that would decide our future. If the boys were too scared to speak, or if they had been brainwashed by the aunts to blame me, it was over. I got into my truck and drove. Not to the hospital, but to the parking lot across the street from it. I sat there in the dark, watching the lighted windows of the 4th floor, the pediatric ICU. I imagined them up there. Small, frail, scared. Inside the hospital, a different kind of war was happening. Flashback, inside the ICU room, narrated via Hunter's reconstruction from later court transcripts. The room was quiet. A social worker, Mrs. Gable, sat by the bed with a tape recorder. She was a soft-spoken woman with glasses, trained to talk to traumatized children. Evan, she asked gently, can you tell me why you were in the basement? Evan looked at her. He was sipping a nutritional shake through a straw, his eyes darting around the room. For the badness, Evan whispered. The badness. Mrs. Gable asked. What is that? The bad blood, Evan said. Mommy said Daddy has bad blood. It makes him hurt people. And we have it too. So we had to starve it out. Mrs. Gable paused. She wrote something down. Did your daddy ever hurt you? Evan hesitated. He looked at Felix in the next bed. No, Evan said. Daddy plays Legos. Daddy carries me on his shoulders. Then why did Mommy say he was bad? Because he kills people, Evan said simply. In the war. Mommy said he enjoys it. And she said if we ate food, we would get strong. And if we got strong, we would hurt people too. Mrs. Gable looked sick. So she stopped giving you food? Yes, Felix piped up. His voice was stronger than Evan's. And the water too. Auntie Clara said water feeds the demon. Did your daddy know you were down there? Mrs. Gable asked the million-dollar question. Felix shook his head. No, Daddy was gone. Fighting the bad guys. When Daddy found you, Mrs. Gable asked, what did he do? He cried, Felix said. Daddy never cries. But he cried. And he broke the cage. Back in the truck, I didn't know any of this. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, praying to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. Monday morning came like a funeral procession. The courthouse was a circus. News vans were parked 3 deep. Protesters were standing on the steps holding signs. Some said justice for survivors, supporting the sisters. Others said veterans are not villains, supporting me. The country was divided. I walked up the steps in my dress uniform. I hadn't worn it since my last medal ceremony. It felt like armor. Oliver met me at the metal detectors. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't slept. I filed the motions, he said, not making eye contact. We're entering the diary into evidence today. Good, I said. Do not flinch, Oliver. We walked into the courtroom. It was packed. Every seat was taken. The jury box was empty. This was just a pre-trial hearing to determine bail conditions and custody. But the judge, Judge Holloway, was known for being tough. I looked at the plaintiff's table. There they were. Morgan, Clara, Daphne. They looked pathetic. Clara's arm was in a complex cast, elevated in a sling. Morgan had a neck brace on. Daphne was in a wheelchair. They were wearing modest, conservative clothes. No makeup. They looked like a church choir that had been run over by a truck. When I walked in, they flinched. A collective, choreographed flinch. Your Honor, The prosecutor began. The state moves to revoke bail. The defendant is a highly trained killing machine who brutally assaulted 8 defenseless women. He is a danger to the community. Oliver stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket. He looked at me, took a deep breath, and walked to the podium. "Your Honor," Oliver said, his voice booming with that practiced lawyer confidence. "My client is a decorated hero. He did not attack defenseless women. He rescued 2 hostages from a torture cult." Gasps in the gallery. "Objection," the prosecutor shouted. "There is no evidence of a cult." "We have the evidence right here," Oliver said. He held up the black diary. Morgan's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide. She grabbed Clara's good arm. The color drained from her face. She recognized the book. "This journal," Oliver continued, "written by Morgan West, details a 31-day program of systematic starvation and abuse. It details the use of cages. It details the use of nails as punishment. And," Oliver paused. He looked at the press gallery. He looked at me. "And it details the financial fraud used to fund it." He didn't mention his name. He played it safe. But he put the book on the judge's bench. Judge Holloway put on his glasses. He opened the book. The courtroom was silent. He read for 5 minutes. His expression went from bored to horrified. He looked up at Morgan. "Mrs. West," the judge said, his voice low and dangerous. "Did you write this?" Morgan stood up, trembling. "Your Honor, it was a metaphor. It was spiritual writing. It wasn't literal." "The medical reports on your sons are not metaphors," the judge roared, slamming the book shut. 2 7-year-old boys weighing 35 pounds is not spiritual writing. He turned to the bailiff. "Bail for Mr. West is reduced to personal recognizance. He is free to go." The gallery erupted. "However," the judge continued, raising a hand, "custody of the children remains with the state until the criminal trial concludes. And that trial starts in 2 weeks. I want this resolved. Fast." As I walked out, free but empty-handed, Morgan passed me in the aisle. She leaned in, her voice a venomous hiss. "You won today, Hunter. But wait until the boys take the stand. We told them what you did in Afghanistan. We told them everything. They're terrified of you." I stopped. I looked at her. "They know who I am," I said. "Do they?" She smiled cruelly. "Or do they know the monster I told them about? The one who kills for fun? Wait until they see you in court, Hunter. They'll scream." I walked away, but the seed of doubt was planted. Had she poisoned them against me? Had she twisted their minds so badly that they saw their savior as their executioner? I had 2 weeks to find out. The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal strategy and sleepless nights. I moved into Oliver's guest house. My own home was still a crime scene, and honestly, I couldn't sleep there anyway. The silence was too loud. Oliver was working around the clock. To his credit, he was actually trying. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was just self-preservation, but he was building a defense that was aggressive. He hired a private investigator to dig into this Sanctum of Light LLC. Turns out, the sisters had been draining family trust funds for years to pay for their retreats. But the real battle wasn't the money. It was the boys. The trial began on a rainy Tuesday. The courtroom was even more crowded than the hearing. The jury had been selected, 7 men, 5 women. They looked serious. The prosecution went first. They played the violent soldier card hard. They put Clara on the stand. Clara was a good liar. She cried on cue. She held up her mangled wrist for the jury to see. "He didn't say a word," Clara sobbed. "He just came out of the dark. He had these metal gloves. He looked like a demon. He broke my wrist, then he laughed. He said he enjoyed it." "And the children?" the prosecutor asked. "Why were they in the basement?" "They were sick," Clara insisted. "They had a fever. They were contagious. We made a quarantine area for them. It was cozy. We gave them blankets and soup. Hunter is twisting everything because he wants full custody to turn them into soldiers like him." I sat there, gripping the edge of the table, my knuckles white. Lies. Then came the medical expert for the defense. "Dr. Aris." "Dr. Aris?" Oliver asked, pacing the floor. In your professional opinion, could the children's condition be caused by a sudden illness? Absolutely not, Dr. Aris said. He projected an X-ray of Evan's ribs onto the screen. See these hairline fractures? These are consistent with severe calcium deficiency over a prolonged period. And these marks on the shins? These are from sustained pressure against a hard surface, like a wire cage floor. The jury winced. But the prosecution had a surprise witness. The state calls Dr. Helen Foster, child psychologist. Dr. Foster took the stand. She looked stern. Dr. Foster, the prosecutor said, you've interviewed the boys since they've been in state custody. What is their state of mind? They are terrified, Dr. Foster said. They exhibit signs of severe trauma. Specifically, they have a fear of loud noises and authoritative male figures. Does the defendant fit the profile of an authoritative male figure? He does. He is a Delta Force operator. He represents the ultimate authority. In my sessions, the boys often speak about the soldier. They are afraid the soldier is going to come back. The prosecutor turned to the jury. The soldier. That's what they call their father. Not dad. The soldier. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The soldier. Is that what they thought of me? Oliver leaned over. Don't react. She's twisting it. It sounds like she's telling the truth, I whispered. Maybe they are scared of me. We have one card left to play, Oliver said. We have to call them. No, I said instantly. I am not putting them on the stand. I am not making them relive this. Hunter, Oliver whispered intensely. If we don't put them on the stand, the jury only has Dr. Foster's word. She says they're scared of you. The only way to prove her wrong is to let them speak for themselves. I looked at the jury. They were looking at me with suspicion. The violent soldier narrative was working. Do it, I said, feeling like I was signing my own death warrant. The next day, the courtroom was cleared of all spectators. Only the jury, the lawyers, and the judge remained. The judge ordered a remote testimony via closed-circuit TV to protect the boys. A large monitor was wheeled into the courtroom. The screen flickered to life. Evan and Felix were sitting at a small table in a conference room at the hospital. They looked better. They had gained a little weight. Their hair was buzzed short, likely to hide the patches where it had fallen out. They were holding hands. Hello, boys, Judge Holloway said gently through the microphone. Can you hear me? Yes, sir, Felix said. His voice was small but clear. We just want to ask you a few questions. You don't have to be scared. Nobody can hurt you here. Oliver stepped up to the microphone. Hi guys, Oliver said. It's Uncle Oliver. Evan's face lit up. Uncle Ollie, I want to ask you about the basement, Oliver said, his voice trembling slightly. Do you remember the cages? The light left Evan's eyes. He nodded. Who put you in the cages, Evan? Mommy did, Evan said. And Auntie Clara locked it. Why? Because we were dirty, Felix answered. We had the bad blood. Did your daddy ever put you in the cages? Oliver asked. No. Both boys shouted it at the same time. Dr. Foster says you are afraid of the soldier, Oliver said. Who is the soldier? Evan looked confused. He looked at Felix. Then he looked at the camera. The soldier isn't Daddy, Evan said. The courtroom went silent. Who is the soldier, Evan? Oliver asked. Evan pointed a finger at the screen. But he wasn't pointing at me. He was pointing at the defense table. At the women. She is, Evan whispered. Auntie Daphne. She wore the army clothes. She wore the boots. She marched around the basement and hit the stick on the ground. She said she was the soldier of God. She said she was training us. I froze. Daphne had been cosplaying as a soldier? Mocking me? Using my profession to terrorize my sons? The jury turned their heads in unison to look at Daphne. She shrank down in her wheelchair, her face turning beet red. And Daddy? Oliver asked softly. Are you scared of Daddy? Felix leaned into the camera lens. His eyes were huge. Daddy is the rescue team, Felix said. Daddy came in the dark. He kicked the door. He smelled like outside. He carried us. I put my head on the table and wept. I didn't care who saw. The Delta Force operator, the breaker of bones, the man of steel, I dissolved. Daddy came for us. Evan added. Mommy said he wouldn't. She said he forgot us. But Daddy never forgets. Oliver looked at the jury. He didn't need to say a word. The violent father narrative had just been nuked from orbit by two 7-year-olds. But then, the prosecutor stood up. He wasn't done. Boys, the prosecutor said, his voice sharp. Did you see what your father did to your aunts? Did you see him break Annie Clara's arm? Objection, Oliver shouted. They weren't in the room. I saw it, Felix said. The room froze again. You saw it? The prosecutor asked, sensing a victory. Tell us what you saw, Felix. I was awake in the hospital, Felix said. I had a dream. But it wasn't a dream. I saw Daddy. He was fighting the monsters. The monsters had knives. Daddy didn't have a knife. Daddy just had his hands. Felix paused. Daddy had to break them, Felix said, his voice hard, sounding exactly like me. Because monsters don't stop unless you break them. The silence in the courtroom following Felix's words was absolute. Monsters don't stop unless you break them. It was a child's logic, brutal and flawless. It cut through every legal argument, every motion, every objection. It was the truth. The prosecutor sat down slowly. He had nothing. He couldn't attack a child who had just justified his father's violence as a necessary act of heroism. Judge Holloway cleared his throat. He looked visibly moved. The witness is excused. Thank you, boys. You were very brave. The screen went black. The trial moved to closing arguments, but the energy had shifted. The sisters knew it. The jury knew it. Oliver's closing was short. You heard the tape, Oliver said, walking in front of the jury box. You heard the doctors. And you heard the children. My client, Hunter West, walked into a house of horrors. He didn't find a wellness retreat. He found a concentration camp run by the people who were supposed to love his children the most. He did what any father would do. He did what any soldier would do. He neutralized the threat. He pointed at me. They want to call him a criminal for breaking bones. I call him a hero for saving lives. Because if he hadn't broken those bones, we would be sitting in a murder trial today. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they came back, I stood up. My legs felt heavy. My heart was pounding in my throat. Will the defendant please rise? I stood. Oliver stood beside me. In the matter of the state versus Hunter West, on the charge of 8 counts of aggravated assault. The foreman, a middle-aged mechanic, looked me in the eye. He nodded once. We find the defendant not guilty. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. On the charge of kidnapping. Not guilty. On the charge of torture. Not guilty. The gallery erupted. This time, the judge didn't bang his gavel. He let the noise wash over the room. But we weren't done. Because now, it was their turn. The state immediately moved to sentencing for Morgan and the sisters. Their trial had been severed from mine, but with the evidence presented in my defense, the diary, the testimony, their plea deals had evaporated. They had pleaded guilty to avoid a trial where the boys would testify in person. Morgan stood up. She was trembling. She looked at me. There was no defiance left. Just fear. Morgan West, the judge said, peering over his glasses. You are the mother. You were the protector. And you became the executioner. You enlisted your sisters in a conspiracy of madness. You starved your own flesh and blood. I was sick, Morgan whispered. I need help. You need a cell, the judge said cold. For the crimes of attempted murder in the first degree, aggravated child abuse, and conspiracy, I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Morgan screamed. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed to the floor. Bailiffs had to drag her up. Clara Miller, the judge continued. You were the ringleader. You were the general of this sick little army. Life in prison. Daphne Miller, 30 years. Eliza Miller, 25 years. One by one, the gavel fell like a hammer. The 8 ants were dismantled. The coven was broken. As they were led away in chains, clanking and sobbing, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt tired. Oliver turned to me. He held out his hand. It's over, Hunter. I looked at his hand. I shook it. Not yet, I said. We still have to get them home. The custody hearing was a formality. With the mother in prison for life and the father acquitted of all charges, the judge granted me full, sole legal and physical custody immediately. I walked out of the courthouse a free man. I drove straight to the hospital. I walked up to the 4th floor. The nurses smiled at me this time. No security guards blocked my path. I opened the door to room 402. The boys were sitting on the floor, playing with a new Lego set someone had donated. They looked up. For a second, there was hesitation. The trauma was deep. It wouldn't vanish overnight. But then, Felix stood up. "Dad." I dropped to one knee. I opened my arms. "Hey guys. I'm back." They ran. They hit me with the force of a freight train. Tiny, bony arms wrapped around my neck. They buried their faces in my chest. They smelled like hospital soap and sterile sheets. But underneath that, they smelled like my boys. "Are the bad ladies gone?" Evan asked, his voice muffled by my shirt. "Yeah, buddy," I said, holding them so tight I thought I might break myself. "They're gone. They're never coming back. They're locked away where they can't hurt anyone ever again." "Did you break them?" Felix asked, pulling back to look at me. I wiped a tear from his cheek with my thumb. "I broke them, I promised. And nobody is ever going to touch you again. Not on my watch." The first year was the hardest. We didn't go back to the house on Oak Street. I couldn't. Too many ghosts. I sold it as is, leaving the furniture, the memories, and the smell of bleach behind. We moved 2 states away, to a small town in Montana near the mountains. Open space. Clean air. No basements. I retired from the Delta Force. I traded my rifle for a fishing pole and my tactical gear for flannel shirts. My new mission wasn't hunting terrorists. It was making pancakes on Saturday mornings and sitting in therapy waiting rooms on Tuesday afternoons. The boys healed slowly. The physical scars faded first. The weight came back. Their hair grew in thick and wild. But the emotional scars were trickier. For the first 6 months, they hoarded food. I'd find granola bars hidden under their pillows and apples stuffed in their socks. I never scolded them. I just bought more apples. There were nightmares, of course. Screams in the middle of the night about the soldier or the cages. I would run in, turn on all the lights, and sit with them until the sun came up. "It's just us," I would tell them. "Just the Westmen. The perimeter is secure." Oliver visited sometimes. He won his election, but he resigned a year later. The guilt ate at him. He set up a trust fund for the boys, millions of dollars to ensure they'd never need anything. We don't talk about the diary. We don't talk about the money. We just watch the boys play in the yard, and we drink coffee in silence. It's a fragile peace, but it's peace. One evening, about 18 months after the trial, I was sitting on the porch watching the sun dip behind the Rockies. Evan and Felix were playing catch in the yard. They were laughing. Real, deep-belly laughs. Felix missed a catch, and the ball rolled near the woods. He ran to get it, then stopped. He stared into the tree line. My heart spiked. I stood up, ready to move. "What is it, Felix?" I called out. He turned back to me. He smiled. "Nothing, Dad. Just a deer." I scared it away. He picked up the ball and ran back to his brother. I scared it away. Not it scared me. He wasn't a victim anymore. He was a survivor. I sat back down. I looked at my hands. The hands that had held a rifle. The hands that had broken bones. The hands that now packed school lunches. People called me a hero. People called me a savage. The truth is, I'm just a father who did what had to be done. I broke the world to save my sons, and I would do it again 1,000 times over. Because that's the job. The only job that matters. As the stars came out, I realized something. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't the silence of an empty house or a dark basement. It was the silence of safety. And for the first time in a long time, I closed my eyes and didn't see the cages. I just saw my sons running free under a wide-open sky. The end. Wow, what a journey. That was a heavy one, wasn't it? It makes you ask yourself, if you were in hunter's boots, standing outside that farmhouse, would you have waited for the police? Or would you have gone in just like he did? I'd honestly love to know what you think. Drop a comment below. I read every single one. Also, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And hey, I want to make sure I'm bringing you the stories you want to hear. What kind of betrayal or justice story should I cover next? Do you prefer military revenge, corporate takedowns, or family secrets? Let me know in the comments, and I'll get to work on the best suggestion. If this story moved you, please take a second to gently hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us keep the lights on and the stories coming. Until the next epic revenge, stay safe and hug your loved ones tight.